Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. We're currently on day 3 of 0.2.0. Grinding Gear Games have put out a mini manifesto. We'll go through that in here. This will outline what they're working on at the moment. Now, it's important to note that some of these things have been done, some of them are in the future. And of what I would deem the most urgent two things for them to fix, there's one in each category. We'll also have a look at the patches that have taken place over the last 24 hours or so. But you know the patch must be really hard when someone who is playing a top 10 character in Hardcore last league, despite only using a level 52 set of gloves, ends up dying to the Bloated Miller on normal difficulty. There must have been some pretty big nerfs for that to happen, mustn't there? Anyways, taking a quick look at Grinding Gear Games' manifesto post, the first thing they mention is that a lot of people are reporting gameplay feeling slow. This does seem to be limited to the campaign. People that are past the campaign are not really reporting this, and really weren't reporting it very much at all. Now, sometimes this comes in the form of people saying monster life is too high, or player damage is too low, or that areas are taking too long to navigate. In this post, I want to talk about some of the things already done, some of the things they're planning on doing. Now, my theory is that the cause of players feeling that they're underpowered for areas in the middle of the game is primarily due to players being undergeared for them, because the game is balanced around having a certain amount of magic find, and those players aren't equipping that. They're going for useful power stats instead, and as a result, they're just falling behind the gear curve. That's my belief, and it's why I think that internal testers at Grinding Gear Games didn't pick this stuff up, because they're like, oh, I've got a gold amulet with a rarity stat on it. Of course I'm going to equip that. Who cares about the other things that have got life and resists on them? And that's just quite different to how other people tend to play the game. So those people in the playtesting environment were thriving. They were saying, hey, this is looking really easy. Whereas other people were saying, hey, this is really difficult. I'm not doing enough damage. The monsters have too much life. Help. The first thing they talk about is a number of things related to the Huntress. I did a video on why I felt that Parry feels bad, and one of the key things is that the Parry debuff is actually tied to the monster that you have successfully parried an ability from, rather than being tied to just a status on your character. And that means that when you go and use your disengage skill to get out of there and get yourself your frenzy charge, you get out of there but you don't get your frenzy charge. Your counterattack ends up targeted on a monster that you haven't parried an attack from, rather than one you have parried an attack from, and therefore you're unable to gain charges in order to fuel all of the Huntress's tremendous amount of spend abilities. Because if there's one thing that Spear players want, it's the ability to get their hands on a lot of frenzy charges. Now, there is a solution in the game at the moment, but it doesn't come online until at least character level 27, and it's only available at level 27 if you happen to get a level 8 Spirit Gem to drop by then. This is Combat Frenzy. Combat Frenzy is an extremely powerful source of frenzy charge generation. It does require a couple of changes in your build, but it's definitely worthwhile using. This is probably the best solution that exists once you get rolling. Once you're late in Act 3, you've got the spirit to equip this, and you're at least level 27. At that point, this is one of the best solutions around for getting the Huntress going. However, they're concerned that the feeling from 1 to 26 is pretty bad, and also that for people that aren't using Combat Frenzy for whatever reason, maybe they just haven't had the Spirit Gem drop, maybe there's something else build enabling that requires them to tie up their spirit, those people, they want to have some sort of other solution for them. GGG plan to give early game players an option to get frenzy charges without using parrying, but they have to be very careful not to make this too easy and to remove the rewards for doing the parry combos. So the solution they've come to is to take something from the Monk's toolkit and transfer it across to the Huntress, which actually makes a lot of sense in my opinion. They're adding a new spear skill, it's called Cull the Weak, and it's effectively killing Palm from the Monk, but instead of granting you a power charge on a Cull, it's going to grant you a frenzy charge on a Cull. So this is something that is a solution to getting early game frenzy charges, with Combat Frenzy being a serious option later, once you get to level 27 or higher, and you're able to source that Spirit Gem. So this part is not yet in the game, and this is one of the things that I think is among the most important things that they're planning to add. They also want to improve the feel of parry more generally. Two areas they've identified are that in some cases it feels like you should parry monsters but don't, and in other cases you get heavy stunned in cases where you feel like you shouldn't. We're currently investigating improvements to these. So that's the first lot of Huntress changes, things around parry. The second lot relate to players that don't want to enter melee range at all, and for this section of the player base, your patch went live a couple of hours before I'm recording this video. So spear throws have had their speed increased substantially. Additionally, this speed has not increased the mana spend per second of these skills, so the mana cost has also been rebalanced down to keep mana consumption per second at the same level. Lightning Spear in particular gained 20% more attack speed than it used to have. Now originally they said the damage was going to remain the same, but when this actually went live, there was a couple of percent extra damage to Lightning Spear as well. So this gives Lightning Spear a slightly faster feel than it had. It was very much a slow, methodical attack before, whereas now it's something that you don't need to be quite as aware of your surroundings in order to execute. The number of times I got stunned out of a use of Lightning Spear was shocking. And of course, if you do get stunned out of a use of it, you end up losing your Frenzy Charge as well. Some other spear throws also got similar treatment, but not as significant as what Lightning Spear got. The second section they talk about relates to player skills that summon minions and the minion life and minion damage that's associated with those minions. Those have been buffed substantially. We'll get to the details in a sec. Note that this is not buffing it to the level of 0.1.1, but this is buffing it most of the way there for lower gem levels, but extreme gem levels, it does end up nerfed quite a bit. Now there's a section on monster life feeling too high. Here, as I said, I think the primary problem is actually that players are just falling behind on the gear compared to what Grinding Gear Games expect them to have, but Grinding Gear Games' solution so far has been to say 25% nerf to monster health, not including unique monsters, in Acts 2, 3, and 4, smaller nerfs in Acts 5, 6, and the second half of Act 1. These are already live, they've been live for a while. Additionally, something else got scaled up in 0.2.0. Rare monsters often have a bunch of normal monsters that are tied to the rare monster. They're in the same pack, and those monsters are called minions. In 0.1.0, those minions had 194% of the base health of a normal monster. In 0.2.0 on day 1, they had 500%. So they went from 194% up to 500%, and some of these monsters got automatically revived as well. Well, that 194% to 500% change has been reverted, so these monsters are back to having 94% more health than the normal monsters that you would find in that zone. I think there's a bit more evidence for that theory that playtesters had more gear than we do, because I could easily see a situation where a playtester reports, gee, everything feels like it's just melting, I feel like I'm overpowered for the area, and then Grinding Gear Games look at it and go, you know what, we want to make some of these rare monster packs feel a bit more impactful, so we're going to make them a bit tankier. Then, of course, players on the live servers act a bit differently, value gear differently, end up with worse gear, and as a result, end up falling a long way behind. The next section relates to large area sizes. So many players are reporting that areas feel like they're too large. Now my feeling on this is that there are a few areas like this. There's a couple in Act 3 that feel like they really drag, and normally when this is the case, Grinding Gear Games say that the main reason is due to other concerns such as monster life or player damage being out, or just a lack of variety within the area. However, they're checking to see if there's any outliers that players are spending too long in, to check if any changes to area size do need to happen. While they're doing this, they've decided to add a number of additional checkpoints to some of the zones. Checkpoints are one of those things that the more experienced you are with the game, the less relevant they are. If you're someone that's new, you often get lost in a zone, and the ability to click on a checkpoint and then teleport somewhere else is really useful. The more experience you get, the more you start to learn layouts, the less important this is. But adding in additional checkpoints will definitely make things just feel a bit smoother for casual players in particular, that large percentage of the player base that haven't studied any of the resources that exist around layouts so far. The next section relates to crashes and disconnects. My understanding here is that for the first 6 hours, it was kind of a dumpster fire for everyone. After that, they got rid of the 3 worst crashes that were taking place, and from then on, the EU servers have been intermittently bad, whereas the other servers seem to have been pretty good. However, a number of things went wrong when they pushed live the patch that gave the additional attack speed to Lightning Spear, and that seemed to have caused a number of additional problems with crashes. It started to get reported that the EU servers went from bad to terrible, and the other servers went from performing well to performing at a mediocre level. I'm not exactly sure what the case is now. It's been flawless for me when I've been playing on the Australian server, but as always tends to happen at League Start, I tend to find I spend more time at making videos and sitting at DaVinci Resolve than I actually get to inside Path of Exile 2. The other thing Grinding Gear Games announced is that they're planning some quality of life features. Now, some of these are pretty significant. Bookmarking locations on your Atlas map is the sort of thing that I think will be very, very welcome once we really get into week 2 or so. I don't think this needs to be in week 1. It'd be good for power gamer players if it is there in week 1, but this is going to be the sort of thing that will make it easier to find something like a Citadel that you can't do yet. So if you realize, oh, I found a Citadel, fantastic, I want to be able to come back to that later, then you can just put a marker to yourself, come back later. Likewise, there'll be particularly juicy tower areas, and especially when there's an intersection between towers and corrupted biomes, these could be some of the juiciest sections on your Atlas, and that's something you're going to want to keep an eye out for when you're looking around, but maybe you're not confident that you can beat those maps yet, so you just keep a marker there, and then you come back when you feel a bit stronger. So that'll be really useful, but I do think that's going to be something that's more critical in week 2 and onwards for most of the player base. Another thing they're working on is stash tab affinities for socketables and tablets, and updating the flask affinity to include charms, particularly socketables and tablets. This will be very, very much appreciated. I believe the intention from Grinding Gear Games is that the fragment tab will eventually have these. The fragment tab is a kind of must-have for endgame players in Path of Exile 1, but it doesn't yet exist in POE 2. I think that's what they're going for, is to have the fragment tab sort of own both of those eventually. But if they can get the affinity out first, then that's something that provides that functionality at a minimum level, and then the fragment tab becomes something that people can buy later if they want it, or they can just continue to use normal tabs instead if they prefer. And the final quality of life thing they're working on is improving some of the UI and other mechanics around specters and tamed beasts. So let's take a look at the changes they actually did today. That's their plans. Let's go through the changes that have actually happened so far. So there's one where they fixed a number of bugs that related to twisters that were empowered by ground effects. This is the second time there's been a bug fix to this. Basically, the intention is that Twister is meant to do what it says it does. If it's doing something way better or way worse, then that's a bug and they are going to fix it. Doriani's corrupted flamethrower ability was doing way more damage than intended. This melted me the first time that I got to Doriani because I underestimated it. There's one rule of the universe, it's that everyone always underestimates the scientist running towards them with a flamethrower. I certainly did, and my character melted in less than 2 seconds because I didn't have very much fire resistance. Otherwise, this was just a bug fix one. The one that was more significant today before that, and that was 12 hours before I'm recording this video, was the aforementioned change of the life of rare monster minions from 500% of base life down to 194% of base life, so a more than 60% nerf to those monsters. That's already been live. Here's the other patch that took place today, 4 hours ago as I'm recording this video. So here we had minions have approximately 15% more life through the early campaign, but the intention is that this is not going to have any impact in the late game. So by the time you hit gem level 30, they're back to day 1 0.2.0 numbers, but before that point, they're going to have a bit more life than they do now. Minions are getting a chunk of extra damage. These numbers look huge, but they're not back up to 0.1.0 numbers. They are way higher than 0.2.0 days. And there's a couple of minor changes to some of the skeletons. After this, we have all of the spear changes. Spear throw, 8% more damage. Lightning spear attack speed, 20% more than it was before, and 5% more damage at all gem levels. Glacial lance attack speed, up 11.1%. Storm lance attack speed, up 9.1%. Whirlwind lance attack speed, up 9.1%. And these skills have generally had their mana cost lowered as well, so that they'll end up costing the same amount of mana per second if you keep spamming them. Otherwise, a number of monsters have had some changes to their abilities that are pretty small. Candlemass, Geonor, Blackjaw the Remnant, Olaton the Remorseless, and Stormgore. All of these have had a few small changes to their abilities. Very important to read these in detail if you elect to play in hardcore, but if you play in softcore, finding out can be fun, so you don't need to read those then. And then after that, there were a couple of real head-scratcher bug fixes. Fixed a bug where banners were just simply not working when placed. Fixed a bug where Ray's Shield was missing the melee type, so it could not be supported by many support gems that were intended to work with it. And a couple of others. Anyways, that's the last of the patches that's gone live. That was about 4 hours ago as I'm recording this video. No doubt it'll take me at least an hour to get it up, so it'll be 5 hours ago by the time that you're watching it. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlords have interesting results, and I will see you around.